Hello and welcome to Good or Bad. It's not Friday the 13th right now, so let's review Friday the 13th Part 2. In 1980 we got the original Friday the 13th, which was a lot of fun. And then, 1 year later, in 1981, director Steve Miner released his sequel, which would bring Jason into the role of the antagonist for the first of many times. But the big question is the film simply a rehash, or did it drift too close to Halloween? Because one of the things separating Halloween and Friday the 13th was the fact that A, in Friday the 13th we didn't know who the killer was, and B, when we did find out, the killer had dialogue. But with bringing Jason into it, we simply have a big silent guy that kills people, which isn't so different from the big silent guy that kills people in Halloween. So, 2 questions and 2 traps this movie can easily fall into. Let's see if it manages to avoid them. The movie begins with Alice, the survivor of the first movie, having nightmares about, well, her encounter with Pamela Voorhees. Well, it would be a tad out of place for her to have a nightmare about something else. And when Adrienne King was asked to reprise her role, she only wanted a small part due to an obsessive fan stalking her. In fact, she went to the length that she did not take another acting job for several years, and even then many of them for a while were voice-only roles. The movie uses Alice's nightmares to recap the ending of Friday the 13th. And when I say recap, I mean recap. It takes 6 minutes to finish. We've had quicker dream sequences in Nightmare on Elm Street. Well, anyway, Alice wakes up from her nightmare, and we see her on the phone to her mother, saying how it is just going to take her some time away from her old life to recover from what she went through. Then the movie has a brief shower scene, without boobs. What are you? Okay, so her phone rings again, but this time it cuts off immediately, which unnerves poor Alice. You know, if I was almost murdered to death by a psychotic woman, I would have invested in some weaponry. Possibly an entire armoury / panic room / home theatre. You know, the essentials. So she grabs a weapon and cautiously investigates an open window, leading to a truly horrifying revelation. A cat! Okay, watching this now, yes, it has been done to death, but back in 1981 the whole harmless animal jump scare tactic hadn't been done quite as much to death as it has been now. It certainly has been used before, but instead of just calling it a straight up cheap jump scare, even by today's standards, I prefer to see it as a sense of humour. It's a bit like seeing Stan Lee in a Marvel movie. You know it's coming, you just don't know when. Okie dokie! So just as Alice thinks everything is hunky-dory, this happens.
The kettle, Jason. Get the kettle.
Alrighty, so Jason has avenged his mother's death and is now living peacefully alone in Crystal Lake. Dumb kids, this is your cue. Yes, we have more camp counsellors that are setting up camp next to what is now referred to as Camp Blood. I wonder whether they'll put that in their promotional material.
And each one of Jason's potential victims in this movie is coming to this camp, which is being used as a camp counsellor training centre, so they can then presumably go off to do whatever counsellors do when they're not being murdered to death. And leading our merry band of counsellors is a man named Paul.
A fearless fighting name. Played by John Foray. Then we have Ginny, played by Amy Steele. These two are essentially our main characters for this movie. Well, that and our beloved Jason, played by Warrington Gillette. And you may notice this is pre-hockey mask Jason, because he doesn't actually acquire the mask until the third movie.
Instead we have Jason simply wearing a burlap sack over his head, which bears a resemblance to both the killer in The Town That Dreaded Sundown and the Elephant Man.
Okay, so around a campfire, Paul tells the story of Jason, which is the movie's way of getting the story of Jason out there to the audience, which is that he drowned when he was a kid, but the locals believed he survived, and Alice, the survivor of the original movie, claimed to see him. So that's how the movie deals with exposition. Well, that and a bloody long nightmare recap scene. And I do like the campfire scary story with the fooling around jump scare at the end of it. Purely because it looks real. It looks like something that would actually happen. So the exposition doesn't seem forced like it can in other movies. Oh yes, and there is another familiar face in this movie. Crazy Ralph, who dies. The next day, Muffin the dog comes face to foot with Jason. Good lord. I hope Muffin makes it. But let's put Muffin aside for one moment, because here are some dumb kids that are ignoring Paul's warning about trespassing in Camp Blood, while getting in as many boob-jiggling shots as possible. Well, I guess there was a reason as to why there were so many Friday the 13th movies, because it sure as hell wasn't the writing.
Oh my god.
What is it?
No, not Muffin. No. Anyone but Muffin. Muffin was such an innocent soul. Muffin never hurt anyone, and now Muffin's dead. You bastards!
What are you kids doing out here?
After being caught by the police, they are marched back to the camp for a stern telling off.
We'll never do it again, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Holt.
No punishment? What kind of place is this?
Ginny,
Yes, Paul.
no seconds on dessert for Jeff and Sandra tonight.
No seconds on dessert. No seconds. So they still get one helping of dessert. For doing the exact opposite of what you told them to do. For specifically doing what you told them not to do is what they did. And their punishment is a little bit less dessert than they would usually get. Can you imagine if this guy had kids? Smoking? You were caught smoking? Oh, you're gonna regret that. You're only getting one serving of double chocolate chip ice cream tonight. Just one. The cop that caught them spots someone running into the woods, so he runs after him and finds Jason's little shrine and dies. Our little gang split up. The vast majority of them go out to have some fun, leaving the rest of them behind to get horrifically slaughtered. Rip off. Whew. It's a rip-off. Paul and Ginny return from the fun outing early to a camp full of dead people.
What is this, a joke?
They wouldn't do anything like this.
Ginny, come on.
Oh, is the power out? How very movie-ish. Guess I didn't really have a good line for that.
Paul, there's someone in this fucking room!
Feel free to help out at any given moment.
Paul? Paul?
I'm not a combat tactician or anything, but in my humble opinion, saying Paul, Paul, Paul isn't as effective as grabbing an object and twatting the bastard over the head.
Paul? Paul? Answer me!
As you can probably guess, Ginny and Jason have a cat and mouse game for a bit with some near misses, such as Jason almost having her, but shoddy workmanship saves the day. And then Ginny goes all Evil Dead on him with a chainsaw, which looks more funny than suspenseful. Maybe it's just because he fell off the chair, I don't know. She runs away and stumbles onto Jason's little shrine dedicated towards his mother, and simply puts on her jumper, and that's enough to fool him? I do wonder what was going through his head at the time. She looks different. But that is definitely her jumper, so it must be her. Oh shit, I forgot anyone can wear a jumper. Die, bitch, die! Ah, what's going on? I thought I killed you. Oh, that's probably not good. Please, milk franchise. I promise I can make you more money. Ugh. So there we have it. This time there's 2 survivors. Oh, wait. Jason isn't done yet. Muffin! Alright, we all know it's coming. Jason smashes through the window, and then Ginny just wakes up on a gurney being carried into an ambulance with no sign of what happened to Paul. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill in the blanks. Jason grabs Ginny, but Paul saves her, sacrificing himself, and then Muffin carries Ginny to safety. And for some reason Jason doesn't attack again. Maybe Muffin is his weakness. Muffin has a soft place in all of our hearts. Who could possibly attack when Muffin is around? Not me. No. Not with Muffin around. That's the end, by the way. That was Friday the 13th, Part 2. So did it live up to the first movie? Did it follow on with a fresh, new, original... No. It didn't. It just didn't. It was simply a rehash featuring Pamela Voorhees' son, Jason, who granted does go on to other movies that are a lot more fun than this. Incredibly silly at times, but still, more fun. At this point, Jason wasn't iconic. The deaths weren't especially that gory or memorable. Not like they were in the first movie, but that doesn't make them bad. They were just okay. In fact, everything in this movie was okay. The acting was okay, the effects were okay, nothing went beyond average.
In defence of one of the kills in this movie, which is the one where 2 people die in bed together, the scene was originally much more intense, but was cut to avoid an X rating. As for the music, it is still composed by Harry Manfredini and still sounds great and adds suspense wherever it's needed, that be over a sudden death or the inevitable chase scene at the end of the movie.
And back to my other question, which was, does the inclusion of Jason, a big silent killer, draw too many similarities with Michael Myers? Yes and no. For one thing, Michael Myers is way more iconic than Jason. In this movie alone, I must make that clear, only in this movie. Because Jason Voorhees overall is very iconic, just as much as Michael, but in this movie he's just a guy with a bag on his head. Don't get me wrong, I am not saying he isn't intimidating in this movie, he definitely is, but anyone with a variety of sharp objects murdering people will look intimidating. As I have said before, the first movie did draw inspiration from Halloween, but what separated the movies was the killer. Pamela Voorhees spoke, she had dialogue, plus it was a mystery as to who the killer was right up until the end. But here we know from the get-go it's Jason, and he never speaks, so it has too many similarities with Halloween.
So don't get me wrong, I do like this movie, I just find that it falls short of the original. Jason was yet to hit his stride, in my opinion.
So to sum up, while everything that a slasher film needs is okay in this movie, that being the deaths, the characters and the killer, it is still a rehash and falls short of the original movie. You have been watching Good or Bad, and I'll see you next time.